Giridharadhari Yashodanandana Braja Janagandana Yashodanandana Braja Raghunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Stotra Shata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Stotra Shata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासारि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय नवद्वीप मायापुर धाम की जय गंगा माई की जय यमुना माई की जय तुलसी देवी की जय भक्ति देवी की जय Srila Prabhupada's Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vikasa Swamanitara. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter number 5, The Cause of All Causes, text number 21. Can somebody pull it up? Kalam karma swabhavam cha mayesho mayaya svaya atman yadrichaya praptam vibhubhushur upadade Kalam karma swabhavam cha Kalam karma swabhavam cha Mayesho mayaya svaya Mayesho mayaya svaya Atman yadrichaya praptam Atman yadrichaya praptam Vibhubhushurupadade Vibhubhushurupadade Kalam karma swabhavam cha Mayesho mayaya svaya Atman yadrichaya praptam Vibhubhushurupadade Kalam karma swabhavam cha Mayesho mayaya svaya Atman yadrichaya praptam Vibhubhushurupadade. Please repeat. Kalam karma swabhavam cha mayesho mayaya swaya adrichaya praptam vibhushurupadade. Kalam karma swabhavam cha mayesho mayaya swaya atman yadrichaya praptam vibhushurupadade. Kalam karma swabhavam cha mayesho mayaya swaya atman yadrichaya praptam vibhushurupadade. Kalam karma swabhavam cha mayesho mayaya swaya atman yadrichaya praptam vibhushurupadade. Kalam karma swabhavam cha mayesho mayaya swaya atman yadrichaya praptam vibhushurupadade. Kalam karma swabhavam cha mayesho mayaya swaya atman yadrichaya praptam vibhushurupadade. Mataji's. Kalam karma swabhavam cha mayesho mayaya swaya atman yadrichaya praptam. Kalam, eternal time. Karma, the fate of the living entity. Swabhavam, nature. Cha, also. Maya, potency. Ishaha, the controller. Mayaya, by the energy. Svaya, of his own. Atman, Atmani, unto his self. Yadrichaya, independently. Praptam, being merged into. Vibhubhushuhu, appearing differently. Upadade, accepted for being created again. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. By his own potency, the Lord, who is the controller of all energies, thus creates eternal time, the fate of all living entities, and the particular natures the living entities had accepted for being created again, before they had independently merged into him. This is different, right? This is different than what I was reading too. Okay. Yeah. Okay. The Lord, who is the controller of all energies, thus creates by his own potency eternal time, the fate of all living entities, and their particular nature, for which they were created, and he again merges them independently. The creation of the material world, wherein the conditioned souls are allowed to act subordinately by the Supreme Lord, takes place again and again after being repeatedly annihilated. The material creation is something like a cloud in the unlimited sky. The real sky is the spiritual sky, eternally filled with the rays of the Brahma Jyoti, and a portion of this unlimited sky is covered by the Mahat Tattva, cloud of the material creation. in which the conditioned souls who want to lord it over the material nature against the will of the Lord are put into play as they desire, under the control of the Lord by the agency of his external energy. As the rainy season appears and disappears regularly, the creation takes place and is again annihilated under the control of the Lord, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 8:19. So the creation and annihilation of the material worlds is a regular action of the Lord, just to allow the conditioned souls to play as they like, and thereby create their own fate of being differently created again, in terms of their independent desires at the time of annihilation. The creation, therefore, takes place at a historical date, as we are accustomed to think of everything which has a beginning in our tiny experience. The process of creation and annihilation is called anadi, or without reference to date regarding the time the creation that first took place. Because the duration of even a partial creation is 8,640,000,000 years, the law of creation is, however, as mentioned in the Vedic literatures, that it is created at certain intervals and is again annihilated by the will of the Lord. The whole material or even the spiritual creation is a manifestation of the energy of the Lord, just as the light and heat of a fire are different manifestations of the fire's energy. The Lord therefore exists in his impersonal form by such expansion of energy, and the complete creation rests on his impersonal feature. Nonetheless, he keeps himself distinct from such creation as the Purnam, or complete, and so no one should wrongly think, due to the Lord's unlimited impersonal expansions, that his personal feature is not existent. The impersonal expansions are a manifestation of his energy, and he is always in his personal feature despite his innumerable unlimited expansions of impersonal energies. Bhagavad Gita 9.5 through 7. For human intelligence, it is very difficult to conceive how the whole creation rests on his expansion of energy. But the Lord has given a very good example in the Bhagavad Gita. It is said that although the air and the atoms rest within the huge expansion of the sky, which is like the resting reservoir of everything materially created, still the sky remains separate and unaffected. Similarly, although the Supreme Lord maintains everything created by his expansion of energy, he always remains separate. This is accepted even by Shankaracharya, the great advocate of the impersonal form of the Absolute. He says, Narayana paro vyaktat, or Narayana exists separately, apart from the impersonal creative energy. The whole creation thus merges within the body of Transcendental Narayana at the time of annihilation, and the creation emanates from his body again with the same unchanging categories of fate and individual nature. The individual living entities, being parts and parcels of the Lord, are sometimes described as Atma because they are qualitatively one with him in spiritual constitution. But because such living entities are apt to be attracted to the material creation, actively and subjectively, they are therefore different from the Lord. Om Ajnanatimidandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishthang Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakarama Hyam Darati Swaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yatha Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitangs Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitana Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay. Kalam karma svabhavam cha mayesho mayaya swaya atman yadrichaya praptam vibhubhu swarupadade. By his own potency, the Lord, who is the controller of all energies, thus creates by his own potency, eternal time, the fate of all living entities, and their particular nature, for which they were created, and he again merges them independently. So, Again, we have another verse which is describing the Supreme Lord's involvement with the creation of the material universe, specifically in relation to the living entities who are entrapped in this material universe. And this is a question which all theologians, religions, philosophies, and everything aim to answer. How does God create this material world? But not really many people have such a sufficient answer for it. Many people accept that the material world was created and that it will end one day, but not many people know where it's coming from, why it's being created, when will it end, what happens after it ends, and things like this. But in Prabhupada's books, all of these things are illuminated in such a way where we can understand the way that things are. This idea of the creation and annihilation of the universe has been a central part of all major religions since time immemorial. And one fundamental aspect, what makes something a religious group or something, is that they have some kind of explanation for these different things. And if they don't have any explanation for these things, we can understand that they're not so much of a religion at all. In modern times, there's so many different mental speculation, mental concoctions of what is God and what is religion, and in this way, so many different factions and different groups of people have sprung about. And specifically, I remember I haven't seen it so much recently, but when I was younger, there was all these they call them doomsday cults, where they're going out in the streets with a big sign saying the end is near, and they're preaching really heavy, you gotta the world is gonna end soon, so you should take your life pretty seriously right now. You should get into it right now. And I remember hearing about this as a kid. There was a big thing in I think, what was it, 12:12 a.m. on the 12th of December 2012, where everybody thought that the world was gonna end because the Mayan calendar ended or something like that. And Y2K was another thing. I remember specifically this 2012 thing. I was on a camping trip with the Boy Scouts, and we were in the middle of the woods at this time, and we all stayed up till 12:12 in the middle of the night, and we were all together joking around about the end of the world. And then I remember a few minutes before it was gonna happen, I was thinking if this is really gonna happen, is this really what I wanted to do with my life? Is this really how I want to go out, with a bunch of goofballs and playing around in a tent? I was really starting to question some of these things. We were joking around about the end of the world and everything like that, but there was an underlying gravity that everybody was kind of hiding. Everybody was in the back of their mind thinking, is it actually gonna happen? What's gonna happen? And because of this ignorance of what is going to happen, when is it going to happen, why is it happening, because of this ignorance, we're constantly living in fear. Every step in this material world, we don't know what's going to come next to throw an obstacle in our endeavors to be happy. And then you'll see there's so many problems in this material world, but the ultimate problem that we face in this material world is this annihilation, this death, because we don't know what's going to happen afterwards. But in Prabhupada's books and in all of the Vedic literatures, we have very sufficient answers which explain this, and which gives enlightenment to the conditioned soul in such a way that he can see clearly what is the past, what is the present, and what is the future. And in this way, he can traverse this material nature very easily without fear. And so these descriptions given in the Bhagavatam and these explanations, of course, they're in relation to this material world, and our whole philosophy is that we shouldn't be attracted to the material world. We shouldn't give so much importance to the material world and these things like this. But because it's explaining the material world in its relationship with the Supreme Absolute Truth, then knowledge of this subject actually becomes a cause for liberation. And it actually becomes a cause for great happiness and knowledge. And so these things are very important. For one who is interested in one's ultimate benefit, one should very scrutinizingly study sections of the Bhagavatam such as this, where it might seem a little bit technical and it might seem a little bit boring in comparison to some of the more far out pastimes that you'll read about in the Bhagavatam. But this philosophy is something which is it is absolutely required for a devotee. A devotee must understand how the Lord is acting in their own life, and being in the material world, being surrounded by the material energy, being inflicted by material desires. It's very important to understand how the Lord is acting with these energies, and how we can get free from being under the control of the material nature. So by understanding the Supreme Lord, who is eternally transcendental to the modes of material nature, we can understand what is our real nature as a servant of Krishna, and how we are eternally transcendental to this material nature. So so the first thing to understand is that there's a beginning of the universe, and there's an end of the universe. This isn't sufficient, and you can't just say that you're a pure devotee, or that you know who God is, just because you believe that somebody created the universe, and you believe that somebody is there who can destroy the universe. It takes a lot more than that. In fact, it's thinking that the material world is all in all is actually the most unintelligent thing. Thinking that this is the most important thing that we should be thinking about is actually a very unintelligent thing. We should have our aim. We should have our eyes set on something much higher than this. Nonetheless, it's important to have a basic understanding, at least a basic understanding of how Krishna is acting in this material world. And this is described again and again in all of Prabhupada's books and all of the Vedic literatures, especially Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, all the different Puranas. They have explanations of the cosmic manifestations and things like this. And for people like myself who are coming from a culture and a society where no emphasis is placed on understanding the intricacies of such subjects, this stuff is completely revolutionary. I don't know, because I don't personally know what it's like to grow up in a culture where you already understand that there's cycles of time, where there's creation and annihilation, and there's karma, and there's reincarnation, all these things. But for somebody who's brought up in a very materialistic society, where you're being taught in school that we're just a bunch of chemicals, that everything was created because of a big explosion, and everything will be annihilated whenever a star explodes again, or something like that. The statements in Prabhupada's books on this subject are extremely revolutionary. They it gives you a whole new perspective on reality whenever you understand things with the perspective of eternality. Whenever you're looking at things with a broader perspective. In the material world, like Prabhupada is saying, we're accustomed to thinking that everything must have a beginning. But in the spiritual world, everything is eternally existing. So in order to understand the nature of the spiritual world, Prabhupada gives us very vivid and very clear explanations of Krishna's energies and how they're acting in terms and in language that we can relate to. He's explaining how this material world is considered to be anadi. Nonetheless, he also says that we can understand that there is a creation of the material world. Although there was a creation of the material world, it is going on in cycles, so therefore you can't just say that there's one creation of the material world. And it's also happening so incredibly distant from this present time that we're in right now, that to try to mentally understand when this material world was created is just frivolous. It's basically useless to try to calculate by your own mental power when this material world was created. The important thing to understand is that this material world was created by a higher power, and that this material world will be annihilated by a higher power. We have nothing, we have no control over this. So like this, if we can understand this point, and if we can understand specifically Krishna's energy in the form of time, then we can become situated on a platform of intelligence where we're viewing everything from the perspective of eternality, which means that we're ultimately able to see what is for our ultimate benefit and what is not for our ultimate benefit. In other words, we are able to actually understand the nature of the absolute truth whenever we are not trying to always compare it with our current understanding that everything has a creation and everything must be destroyed, everything is temporary, like this. We have to somehow or other wrap our minds around understanding the fact that there is a higher spiritual nature which is not subject to the laws of material nature which we are subject to. You know, here in this material world, there are 6 basic transformations that every material thing which is in contact with the spiritual energy must undergo. The first thing is that we are born. The second thing is that we grow a little bit. Third thing is that we create some byproducts, and then you start to dwindle, and then eventually you are annihilated. And we can see this with every single living entity in this material world. And we can see this with every creation which is material, but is being created by that spiritual energy. But in the spiritual world, this is not existent. That everything is eternal. Everything is full of knowledge. Nothing is dwindling away. Even in this material world, in the heavenly planets, all of these the aspect of dwindling and disease and things like this, they're not so prevalent. And in fact, the residents of the heavenly planets are said to have these beautiful garlands of flowers which never get old. You know, here we just have the flowers up on the altar for like a day, and then by the end of the day, they're all like withered away and they're losing their fragrance and everything like this. So even in the material world, we can see a spectrum of things which are created and annihilated in very quickly, and then things which are created and annihilated in very big scales. So in this way, by seeing the variegatedness of this material world, one should at least try to understand that there is a possibility for something to exist eternally, given we understand the difference between the material and the spiritual natures. And this is something which is impossible to understand simply by observing the material world around us. Therefore, the emphasis is given that we must hear from higher. From a higher perspective, we must hear from someone who has seen the material, who has seen the spiritual energy, or we must hear from the proprietor of that spiritual energy himself. And in Prabhupada's books, we get both of these things. Prabhupada is directly in touch with Krishna, so therefore he is directly seeing how Krishna is acting, and Krishna is obviously speaking in Bhagavad Gita, and we're hearing the words that Krishna is speaking, and he is directly the proprietor of all material and spiritual energies. So like this, if we are in contact with such a source of knowledge, then the existence in the material world won't be so bewildering. Right now, it's very, very confusing. It's described in the teachings of Lord Kapila that the living entity is trapped up in the womb of the mother, and he's praying to Krishna, okay, this time when I get out, I promise I'll be your devotee, I promise, blah, 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 blah. And then he gets out, and then instantly the material nature casts over this illusion. And then from the very beginning of one's life, depending on one's birth, he's engaged in completely illusory activities. But this is even though this is the life of most living entities in this material world, practically all of them, it's not necessarily the all in all. There is something higher than this. It's not that you're just forced by the material energy to be an illusion all the time. And the solution, the secret to unlocking this knowledge is found in the Vedic literatures. It's found in the Vedas in general. Veda means knowledge, and those who are in knowledge, they have access to these teachings. So the nature of the material world is obviously temporary. As I was saying before, you can observe this in everything around us. Even if you leave a room completely empty, we have this storage wing over here. We have a room that's just like full of random stuff that we're not using. Even if you just leave that for some time, if you come back after a few years, half of this stuff will already be like rotting and falling apart. There'll be like a layer of dust over everything. You can see that even without something being used, something being seen all the time like this, the material energy, the material things are constantly being destroyed. And this is due to the influence of time. And time acts differently in the material world, and it acts differently in the spiritual world. There's, I'm sure most of the devotees here have been listening to these lectures by His Holiness Bhaktivikas Swami, where he goes really, really in depth into this energy of Krishna known as time. And whenever he released this first lecture, right from the beginning, he just kind of asked the question, okay, so what is time? Just think about it. What is time? And I remember hearing that and being like, wait, like, what is time? Like, I really don't understand what time is. If you really try to think about it, you can say, okay, I know what time is because I see the movement of the hands on the clock, or I can, if you're more sophisticated and intelligent, you can see the movements of subatomic particles and you can calculate time by that. You might be able to calculate the movement of time, but what is that time? What is that force which is moving these things? What is the difference between the past and the future? And if you really start to try to understand it, it's actually very, very bewildering. And in the material world, time acts in such a way with the most important aspect of time in this material world is that it's the destroyer. That actually, in due course of time, everything is destroyed. Of course, this time factor is also facilitating the creation and the maintenance of this material universe, but the most prominent way that we see time is in its aspect of destroying. And going back to this idea that we're coming up in a culture and we're being taught in school that time means a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's completely different than what we're being taught in Srila Prabhupada's books, and this is this is another instance of completely revolutionary ideas, a completely revolutionary knowledge which is being presented. That actually time is eternal, and that time in the material world is existing in these cycles. And it's facilitating the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the material universes again and again and again and again. And actually, to try to understand time in terms of a beginning, a middle, and an end in a linear fashion, it doesn't make any sense at all if you really think about it. The scientists, they say that there in the beginning of the creation, there was a big bang, and then right when that big bang happened, that was when time began, and then after that, that's when time continued. But in order for there to be a beginning of time, then something had to be happening before that too. Even if nothing was happening, there was a time where nothing was happening, and then there is a time where something is happening. So therefore, there was something before time, according to their own philosophy. And anyways, you can listen to these lectures and really kind of experience a whole other understanding of how Krishna is acting through his time potency. But the reason I'm speaking about this is because this is one of the three things being mentioned in this purport. What are the three things that the Lord, by his potency, anyways, the translation is different, but the three things is that he creates eternal time, he creates the fate of all living entities, and he creates the particular natures of the living entities in the material world. And all of these things are interlinked. All of these things are are related to each other very intimately. And we can understand that this potency of time is what is facilitating all movement in this material world. It's also facilitating the particular nature, the particular natures of the living entities, and is also facilitating all the fate of all the living entities. And according to our own desires and according to our own activities in this material world, Krishna, in his potency as time, facilitates our enjoying, suffering, birth, death, old age, and disease. All these things are being facilitated by his time factor. And this time factor is a little bit difficult to see as being a personal God, because this time is something which is, you can't define it. It's all pervading. It's everywhere. It's always existing. It's there, but we can't have a conversation with time. We can't love time. We can't express service to time like this. So this is being explained by Srila Prabhupada, how the material world is being all pervaded by Krishna's external material energy. And for a devotee, this is not so bewildering. This what is this verse? Matta parataram nanyat kinchirasti dhananjaya Mayi sarvamidang protam sutre manigana iva. That the entire material and spiritual worlds are existing on Krishna's impersonal energy. They're almost as if pearls which are strung on a thread. And if you think of like a thread of pearls, that you see the pearls and you see that they're being held together. You don't see what is holding them together, but you just understand that they're being held together by something. The pearls don't stick together like that automatically. There has to be something within them. There has to be something which they're resting upon. And this is actually Krishna's external material energy. So the devotees, they see this as always being in relation to Krishna in his personal form. The impersonalists see this as being all in all. And actually, Prabhupada explains that of course, to see the material energy as all in all is very unintelligent, but also to see the impersonal energy as all in all is also very unintelligent. One must come to a platform of being able to see how Bhagavan, or the personal aspect of the Supreme Lord, is actually that which everything else is dependent on. Although we have these three what are they called? Features of the absolute truth. We have Bhagavan, the personal aspect. We have Paramatma, the localized aspect, and we have Brahman, which is the impersonal aspect. Although we have these things there, still we are able to see a gradation of dependency. Actually, this Paramatma and of Brahman are actually both dependent on Bhagavan. The existence of Krishna as a person is actually that which everything else is coming from, even his own spiritual energies, which are absolute in the sense that they are completely spiritually equal in many respects to Krishna as a person, but they cannot exist without the existence of the personality of Krishna, which everything is emanating from. So all of these things are very technical and very, very difficult to understand. In fact, I'm kind of happy that they changed this purport, or this text, because when I was reading this, just reading it was like a little confusing. All these commas and things like this. It's actually explained a little bit better in this translation. That's my opinion. But anyways, the point is that just simply trying to understand these subject matters without the help of someone who has seen the truth, it becomes a source of great bewilderment. And for material scientists who try to explain these things from their own whimsical ideas, they might be held on great pedestals and they might be worshipped and praised by so many of their followers, but they actually look like such fools whenever you can really understand from the perspective of eternality, which Prabhupada is giving us light into. And this is this illumination of understanding these different things is brought upon by the spiritual energy, by this this divine knowledge which is being imparted to us by Prabhupada's purport. So this is something which is completely different from the material world that we are observing around us. Prabhupada's books are completely different than some other book that you find in like a laboratory, which is explaining let's say the birth of a fetus, or the development of a fetus and things like this. By reading Prabhupada's books, we can actually see things with a spiritual perspective. And this perspective is completely outside of the realm of all material energies. And it's completely untouched by any tinge of personal motivation, of any of these four defects. What are those? The tendency to commit mistakes, to have imperfect senses, cheating propensity. What is the fourth one? Illusion, the tendency to be an illusion. Prabhupada's books are completely free from these four defects of the conditioned soul, whereas all other factions of so-called knowledge in this material world are completely plagued with all of these material contaminations. So we are viewing things from a completely different perspective whenever we're seeing through the light of Shastra, whenever we're seeing reality through the Guru Parampara, through Srila Prabhupada, through his books, and through the Vedic literatures. So in this way, we can actually understand the nature of reality. We can see the difference between matter and spirit. And these two energies are being presented in this purport, where we have the the cloud of the Mahat Tattva, which is existing in the spiritual sky. And Prabhupada says this is the real sky. Here in the material world, we have the sky, and I didn't know anything about this before reading Prabhupada's books, but and I never really thought about it either. But you have the sky. Everybody, if you say the sky, then you just think of all the air up here, but actually the sky isn't the oxygen and the hydrogen and the nitrogen and all these different things which are existing in our atmosphere, because the sky continues after the atmosphere has ended. There's like different levels of atmosphere. You have like the exosphere and all these different things. And the sky is existing in all of these different things. There's actually the space, it's called space or ether in Prabhupada's books. And that's something I completely didn't understand before reading Prabhupada's books at all. But Prabhupada says that even this sky in the material world, which we see as being all-pervading and which we see as being that which is untouched by anything, which is existing, everywhere and in everything, this is actually not even the real sky. This seems like the most real thing in this material universe. There's all these other things existing within the sky. This seems like the biggest, the broadest. This seems like the real thing in the material universe. But actually, the real sky is the spiritual sky. And why is this? It's because the material sky is limited. For all intents and purposes, it's very easy to think that the material sky is completely limitless. If I was just reading something recently where, anyways, they're always releasing different measurements of of our universe, and it's always getting bigger and bigger and bigger every single time that they release some kind of new discovery or something like that. But I was reading this thing where it was talking about how our solar system, or our solar system is just it's one of the smallest solar systems in our galaxy, and our galaxy is one of the smallest galaxies in the universe, and the next closest galaxy is like, if you get like 400 billion of our galaxies and put them in a line, that's how far away the next galaxy is. And all these, it's so incredibly vast, and this is just one universe, if what they're saying has any validity at all. But I was just thinking, if this is so vast, and if you can see so much variety in this material world, and if there's so much substance in this material world, then what could possibly be greater than this? And for many people, for materialistic people, they see, even if they believe in God, and if they have some understanding that God is acting and there's some relationship there, even for these people who think that that God is existent and that the material world is there, they see that the greatest glory of God is that He's created such a vast material world, and just one universe that we're in. They see that this is His ultimate glory, and you'll see the prayers of materialistic people towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and you'll see the descriptions of God in materialistic literatures, which are describing God as being the creator, maintainer, and annihilator of the material world. And it doesn't go much further than that. And for materialistic people, that's very satisfying. Just knowing that is enough. They see that God is the most powerful thing in this material world, and that He's the creator, the sustainer, and the annihilator of everything, and that nobody else can come close to Him in this aspect. But for one who sees the Supreme Absolute Truth and how it is acting outside of this material universe, you can understand that the creation of the material world is something which is very insignificant. In fact, it's described as just being an insignificant cloud in the great spiritual sky, which is existing in the spiritual world outside. And this is explained in the Brahma Samhita. You have the Goloka namni nija dhamni tale chatasya devi mahesha haridhama suteshu teshu te te prabhava nichaya vihitaschayena govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami. So I'll start from the bottom. So you have Devi Dham, which is, so Devi means Durga, which means the personification of Krishna's material energy. This material world is called Devi Dham, and that makes up 1/4 of the whole creation. The next fourth is called Mahesh Dham, which is of course we have like Shiva Loka, which is a a planet which is situated halfway in and halfway out of the material world, but also in the light of the Bhagavad, Prabhupada actually writes that the impersonalists who desire to merge in with the impersonal Brahma Jyoti, they enter into Mahesh Dham, so this impersonal world, I guess you can call it. And then you have Hari Dham, which is all of the Vaikuntha planets that are existing in the spiritual world. And then above all of these things is Goloka, is Krishna Loka, where Krishna is eternally existing. And each one of these is there's a degradation there, and of course like I'm saying, this Devi Dham is so magnificent, is so great, and so vast, and so beautiful, and so complex, and all of these things are there. But it's actually just a very insignificant portion of Krishna's energies, and he invests his energies in many different ways. But whenever he invests his energies in creating and maintaining and annihilating the material universes, it's very, very insignificant to him. And for those who are inhabitants of the spiritual world, it's not like they're in Christianity you get this picture of like three worlds basically. You have like heaven, earth, and hell. And then like the people in hell, they're always like looking up, like, thinking, oh man, I really messed up. The people in heaven, they don't know what's going on, except for Christians who can see that there's hell and there's heaven. And then you have heaven where they're all looking down and they're like laughing at everybody that's suffering in the material and in the material world and in hell and everything like that. So it's not like that. It's not like that for real liberated personalities. In fact, of course, they have attained their Satchidananda, and some of them have attained it after undergoing existence in the material world. But most of the living entities in the spiritual world are just eternally existing in the spiritual world. And because they are Satchidananda, they are completely full of knowledge, of consciousness, of knowledge, and of bliss. There's the understanding there that there is the material world, that there is the material world. Of course, a liberated person never has any desire to enjoy the material world, but there's some understanding that it is there, but they're not always thinking about it like us inhabitants of the material world are always thinking about the material world. It's something which is very, very insignificant. Just like when you have a perfectly blue sky, and then there's just like a tiny little cloud like in the corner that it's not blocking any sunlight, it's not raining, it's not creating any shadows or anything like that. It's practically, you don't even think about it at all. You say, oh, the skies are so clear today. So this material world is considered to be a very insignificant portion of Krishna's unlimited energies. And of course, the subject of this purport and the subject of this class isn't to so much go into the aspects of Krishna's spiritual energies and how the nature of the spiritual world, but nonetheless, in order to develop some kind of contrast between the material and the spiritual natures, Prabhupada explains the spiritual sky, and he explains how the Mahatattva, the sum total of all material energies, is existing like a cloud in this spiritual sky. But within this spiritual sky, which is being all pervaded by Krishna's bodily effulgence, what is that? Yasya prabha prabhavato jagaranda koti shvashesha vasudhari vibhuti bhinnam tad brahma nishkalam anantamashesha bhutam govindamari purusham tamahang bhajami. That actually this impersonal energy, this light which is all pervading in both spiritual and material worlds, this is all existing from the illumination, the effulgence coming from the body of Krishna. And actually within this spiritual sky there is unlimited spiritual planets. There is unlimited variety. There's unlimited enjoyment. And the difference between these planets and the material planets is that they were never created. They never undergo any types of worldly changes, and of course they're never annihilated. They're eternal. It is Krishna's eternal abode. The difference between time acting in the material world and where there's these cycles of creation, maintenance, and destruction, the difference between that time acting in the material world and that time acting in the spiritual world is that the the only purpose of time in the spiritual world is only to expand the pastimes and expand the enjoyment of Krishna, and expand the opportunities for his servants to serve him in the spiritual world, and expand all of the varieties and all these things there. So in this way, the spiritual world, we have to understand, is completely different than this material world. It was never created, and it's constantly expanding. It's constantly getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's never going to stop. And from the very beginning, it was unlimited, and at every single moment, it becomes more unlimited and more unlimited and more unlimited. It's completely inconceivable whenever we're trying to compare it with the material energy, because the material energy, like Prabhupada is saying, there's these categories which are set, and then at the time of creation, these categories are there. There's the different elements, there's the different qualities that the living entities can acquire. All of these things are already set. In fact, the sojourn of the conditioned soul in the material world, you'll see so many patterns between so many different people, where they're all experiencing basically the same life. And I remember, years ago, on like iFunny or something, there was this like really popular meme where it was saying, this proves that we all live the same life. And then it had just like various video clips of like people doing the same thing, like anyways, I'm trying to remember. One of those things was like getting like a comb and running your finger over it and go like da 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 da. And then another thing was like I don't remember. There was like these little things that like literally everybody does, and then you watch this video and think, oh, like wow, like everybody does this. We're actually like all like pretty similar. And this is because we have all been associating with these three modes of material nature since time immemorial, and we have acquired various qualities because of this. And there's different, we were, anyways, I used to be into like the psychology and stuff, and there's this Carl Jung or Carl Jung or whatever they call him, and he's got this whole philosophy of different archetypes of personalities and of like. It goes really, really. These archetypes cover. They explain everything in this material world. There's different categories of the material energy. There's different categories of personalities. There's different categories of bodily makeups. There's different categories of hot and cold and all these different things. And all of that is there. And all of these things are existing from the very creation of the material universe. There are certain boundaries, there are certain laws of nature by which we cannot transgress in this material world. Nonetheless, we are given an opportunity to come here and try to enjoy separately from Krishna. Although Krishna is all-pervading in his impersonal feature, and although Krishna is personally acting in so many different ways in the lives of the conditioned souls, we're still thinking that that we are the doers here. What is that? Prakriti priya karma gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. We're thinking kartaham. I am the doer. I am the controller. And this is because of delusion of the false ego. And every single living entity in this material world is inflicted by this same disease, as being deluded and being under illusion because of his identification with the material energy. But by understanding how Krishna's energies are working, and by understanding especially how these energies how they apply to my life, what is that? There's this verse in Bhagavatam that it explains how the most important thing to everybody is themselves. Do you know this one? I think it's in the 10th canto. The most dear thing to everybody is oneself. Anyways, if you can understand how Krishna is acting in direct relationship to you personally, then it starts to click with people. And then they so we can because we're trapped in this material world, by seeing how Krishna is acting in this material world, we can, one who is intelligent can see how we are directly affected by it. But also, Krishna has entered this material world in the form of Paramatma, where he's not only existing within our heart, but he's existing within every single atom. And not only within every single atom, he's existing between every atom. So Krishna is personally present in all pervading in this material world. What is that? No, Brahma Samhita. Eko Prasurachayitam Jagarandakotim Yachakti. Yachaktirasti Jagaranda Chayayantaha Andantarastha Paramanu Chayantarastham Govindamari Purushang Tamahang Bhajami. And this verse is actually a good maybe you could pull it up, Ty? It's Brahma Samhita text number 35, maybe? 34, 36, 35. Try 35. The Eko Pyasau Rachayetang. Not 35. 35. There it is. Okay, so he is an undifferentiated entity as there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof. In his work of creation of millions of worlds, his potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and he is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe at one and the same time. Such is the primeval Lord whom I adore. So this is describing how the Supreme Lord is existing within his creation, and that the created is in one sense non-different than the creator, that the potency and the possessor thereof. Just like the sunlight, you can understand, if there's, of course it's a very cloudy day, but if there was rays of sun coming into the room here, we can say, don't sit in the sun, or the sun is entering the room like this. You're not sitting in the sun, you're sitting in the sun's rays, but you can understand that the existence of the sunlight, of the sun rays, is, you can't separate it from the existence of the sun, just like you can't, if the sun was existing without sunlight, then there would be no, what is the sun? They're completely interlinked. So the same thing with all of Krishna's energies, you can see how they are directly interlinked. And he's existing not only within every single living entity, but within every single atom and in between every single atom. And for one who can see like this, he can see how Krishna is personally acting within him at every given moment. He's existing everywhere around me. He's watching. He's observing everything that I'm doing. And in this way, one starts to understand, why am I here? What am I doing here? I remember, going to church as a little boy. They're talking about how God is always watching, and that you got to be careful doing like sinful activities because God sees it, and then you get punished for that. And I remember thinking, okay, how is God watching me? I don't see God watching me anywhere. I don't feel like God's never talking to me. God, where is God? They say he's always watching me. They say he's observing everything. And the highest understanding that I could possibly think of how God is watching everything is that God is in the light bulbs and he's in the street lights, because those were everywhere. I was thinking, actually, maybe God is watching through all these lights and through the street lights and things like this, because these are everywhere you go, there's a street lamp, or there's everywhere in the house, there's some light bulbs or something like that. He must be watching through these things. But they never explain how God is actually in everything. Like, if you shut off all the lights in the room, it doesn't mean that God's no longer watching. I didn't really understand that. It didn't really click. But the Prabhupada's books reveal that God is all pervading. The Christians, they'll say that God is in your heart, that Jesus is in your heart, but they won't say that Jesus is in everything. They won't say that God is in matter or anything like this. So it's if there is no observer of all activities, whether or not there's a person there or not, then who is holding everything accountable? Who is delegating the different who is delegating the fate of everything existing in this material world? There's this very common mental I don't even know what they call it. In Buddhism, they have a word for that, what is it? Konik or Cohen? Yeah, they call it that. But there's this very famous thing where it's okay, so if in the forest, if a tree falls but there's nobody there to hear it, does it make a sound? And they think really, really deeply, does it really make a sound? Because who will say if it does make a sound, and who will say that it doesn't make a sound if nobody's there to observe it? And we'll never actually know if it does, because if you go there to see, then there is an observer, and like this. And even in modern times, with the development of this quantum physics and things like this, they actually one of the fundamental aspects of this whole philosophy of this whole theory is that the observer plays a direct he plays a direct part in the existence of reality. And that whenever there's no observer, then you can't say that anything is actually existing there. That basically this whole quantum theory thing is that there's particles, everything existing as a wave, and only whenever there's an observer, it exists as a particle which is situated like this. Like if there was no observer, then, and if I put this back there, then it doesn't necessarily remain as an object which is fixated in time and space. The only thing which fixates something in time and space is when there's something observing it and something which is watching it like that. Super confusing stuff. But if they understand that Krishna is observing everything everywhere at all times, then this whole it's actually the missing piece to like all of these philosophies in the world since time immemorial. It's that missing link, which is explaining how everything is going on perfectly in this material world. That of course, there's no understanding of karma or reincarnation or anything like that. But if for somebody who refuses to understand like that, then you can explain that, of course, this is how it happens because Krishna is always observing like this. You know, the old argument: if God is real and if God is all good, then why do bad things happen to good people and things like this? If you understand that Krishna has been observing them from many other lifetimes, and they get what they deserve according to their own fate, and you understand how Krishna is delegating this, then you won't be in so much illusion whenever you see the activities in this material world, which appear to be sometimes extremely unequal. They sometimes appear to favor this type of race, or all of these things are understood whenever one can see how Krishna is the observer of everything. And in this manifestation of Krishna as time and his impersonal, all-pervading feature, in this manifestation of Krishna as the Paramatma, which is observing everything, and even in Krishna's manifestation as the material energy itself, Krishna is eternally situated in the spiritual world as a person. There's another really good one. Yes, well, so that's there where Krishna is eternally Goloka Eva. Yeah. Is towards the end. Anyways, the Krishna, although he's expanding himself in so many different, I guess it's the same thing. No, this Ekopya Saura Chaitam, that although he's expanding himself in so many different ways, he never loses anything. Of course, the most famous, Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate, that the supreme absolute truth is complete and it is perfect. And all emanations coming from the supreme absolute truth are also completely perfect in themselves. And at never any point in time does that supremely perfect absolute truth ever diminish because of his expansions, and neither do those expansions ever diminish because they are only a part of the whole. What I was thinking of was the Deeparchireva hidashantaram abhyupetya Deepayate vivrita hetu samana dharma Yastadrageva hicha vishnutaya vibhati govindamari purushang tamahang bhajami. So you have like the original candle, and then you have many other candles, and you can light all these other candles with that same original candle. And it's not that because this one was lit afterwards and it's taking from the energy of this candle, it's not that it has a diminished amount of energy. All of the expansions of Krishna they have that same potency. That's why we can see that time is non-different from God. We can understand it like this. So, Krishna in all of his different manifestations, even within this material world, how he's acting in this material world, are just as potent as Krishna, who is killing many demons, who is enjoying with the cowherd boys and Goloka and all these different things. His potency, just how he is all pervading, his potency is all pervading. And actually we can see how Maya, which is just a perverted reflection of Krishna's spiritual energy, we can see how even this material energy is practically God. For all intents and purposes, we can see how the material energy it can't be overcome by any inhabitant of the material world. And this is because it is an expansion of Krishna's energies. All of Krishna's energies, they are imbued with this same potency. Especially whenever we see Krishna's incarnations in the material world, it might seem that Krishna is being forced to enter the body of a boar or of a hog or something like this due to his qualities and due to his fate and all these different things. It might seem that he's being forced to take birth just like us and act according to his nature just like us. But actually, that same potency, Krishna in his original form, is fully invested in all of his expansions. Anyways, I only really talked about like the first half of the purport, and there's a lot more that we can go over, especially in regards to Krishna and the jiva actually being completely transcendental to this material world. But we can end there, and if anybody has any comments, questions, corrections. Prabhu, do you have anything? Thank you. Ranjar Prabhu. No. You have something?
I don't. I mean, like, I guess like our understanding of the creation is so very vivid. You know, we have a lot of details in regards to it, and a lot of people think it's like far-fetched and this and that. You know, especially all I really know in background is like Christianity, and so I looked up like Genesis in the Bible is like the creation, and it's actually like very in line. You know, obviously not as detailed. And things are like a little back and forth, but it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So, heavenly planets and the earthly planets. The earth was formless, empty, and dark, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. So, we have Mahavishnu and such. And also it teaches about like the creation of the plants, the animals, the natures of living beings. And it says he gave man every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth and every tree that has fruits with seeds in it. This food will be for you. And for the beasts, which are the animals, they will get every green plant for food. And it was so. And that also says, that goes to show that, man was given plants to eat as well. So that already, it doesn't say.
But then if you keep reading in the Old Testament, then God changed his mind. He changed his mind after that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Actually, you can eat the animals too. Anyways, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. So it's not so far-fetched. It's just a little bit. We have.
Yeah, it's not far-fetched at all. In fact, if you would start asking questions to the Christians, you have this whole like flood where what was his name? Abraham? Moses? Noah. Yeah, Noah. He built like a big boat and he survived the flood where literally everything else was like destroyed except he got every species of life. It's like a super far out story. It's like, okay, like none of the Christians are like really talking about this. They're really not talking about the giants that are mentioned in the Bible who were like basically demigods that had like bigger powers and all this. In fact, I read something a long time ago that said that these giants, they must have been able to fly because in the Bible they're mentioned before the flood and they're mentioned after the flood, but they're never mentioned to be on that boat that Noah had. So they must have like left the planet or like flown away or like something like that, because they survived the annihilation. They don't want to answer any questions about the giants. They don't want to. There's descriptions of the angels, like very, very like detailed descriptions of angels sometimes, and it says they're covered with eyeballs and like all this crazy stuff. Yeah, there's some angels. They're just how like Lord Indra. Yeah, Yeah, so like
Yeah.
these descriptions are there in the Bible. Even you know they say all these things about like astrology and all these different things. But the three wise men who went to go and give gifts to Jesus whenever he appeared in this world, they were following the stars. They were religious men. They were following some religion by which the constellations were something that was very important. They saw that there was a Messiah who was going to be born because of the constellations, and then they following like this, they went and found Jesus. Except they won't admit to like any of these sciences which are existing. No, this is some pagan holiday that they replaced. This is like nobody knows the titi that Jesus was born on. No, nobody knows. So, there's so many of these things that the Christians can't explain. And then whenever we present some knowledge which is way more detailed than theirs, they say, "Oh no, you can't possibly understand it in so much detail." Just it's the frog in the well type of thing going on. Just because they can't understand in such a detail, and just because their books they don't explain in such detail, they say nobody can do that. So people with open mind, they see Prabhupada's books and they say, okay, this is something which is revolutionary. And it's actually completely in line with any genuine scientific discovery in this material world, any genuine logical observations of the material world. And even, like you're saying, it goes in line with a lot of the descriptions that are found in the Torah and the Bible and the Quran and everything, you know. This is just the Prabhupada opens up the Srimad Bhagavatam by saying that, or is it the Bhagavad Gita? By saying that this is, all these other scriptures are there, but this is like this is the conclusion of all of this. This is all the information which was missing in all these other scriptures is being provided in these books, you know. Purport of the first shloka of Bhagavad Gita. And more, yeah. Yeah, so that's given. But even then, it's also said that that the Puranas and everything like that is also incomplete. There's so much more. And the heavenly planets, the Srimad Bhagavatam is what, like 100,000 shloka or something like that. So we just have a small fraction of all the knowledge which is actually available. Anyways, I'm blabbering. Was there anything from the Matajis? It's already 9 o'clock. But yeah, is it something quick? Uh-huh. Yeah, so one of the things which Prabhupada put in his purport of this verse was this verse number, what is it? Bhagavad Gita 8:19, which is, sorry. Again and again, when Brahma's day arrives, all living entities come into being, and with the arrival of Brahma's night, they are helplessly annihilated. So every day of Lord Brahma, there's an existence so there's three worlds, more or less. There's three categories of worlds, and then during Brahma's day, all of them are existing, and during his night, only the top one is existing. Everything else becomes filled with the waters of devastation. And this happens every single day and night of Lord Brahma. But Lord Brahma, his year is 365 days, and his life is 100 years long. So this is going on again and again and again before the final annihilation of everything in the material world. So this is it's just one partial annihilation is what, 8,640,000,000 years or something like that. So it's just the partial is very, very big. All the numbers are given in the Bhagavad Gita. Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vancha kalpatrubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.